how can we remedy fraudulent ballots and prevent election theft? Has anybody thought about how we could do that? Well, here is my suggestion for how we do that. Republicans, or people who will vote Republican, patriots, nationalists, or maybe they vote Republican sometimes, not other times, smart people, resourceful people, of any of these groups, constitutionalists, whatever they might be, who will vote Republican always or sometimes or when they vote, who nonetheless in some way, shape, or form object to the Democrats and Democrat voters and their anti-whitism and what they're doing to these once great United States. Folks like that, resourceful, smart folks, they need to do research in every locale. They need to research every locale. And there's been a lot of research already done by people who investigated how Democrats, they allege, created fake ballots for people who were dead or people who weren't citizens or people who were citizens, but that enabled them to vote many times or whatever it is. A lot of this research is already done. It's out there. It's everywhere. But surely there will be other places where no such research was conducted because there was no need. Maybe Biden won by just a whopping landslide, or Trump won by a whopping landslide. Still, research should be done in these areas to ascertain the safest ways to create fake ballots. If people like this, resourceful, smart people, did this all across the country, research the ways in which ballots might be faked, the safest way to do it, so that even the dumbest person could do it. And then they were to take this information, if this were to happen, and they would put this information everywhere on the internet. And I mean everywhere. And I mean even maybe mail it wholesale, drop it out of airplanes, whatever it takes, in a way that these smart, resourceful people could not be identified by law enforcement for doing this. And they were to make that information, just promulgate it to the four corners of the United States. And then, along with that promulgation, include the information about the creation of these fraudulent ballots in the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands, even in a presidential election, in the tune of many millions of fraudulent ballots. If that were to happen, if people who were going to vote Republican decided to take these instructions and safely create, as safe as it could be, fraudulent ballots and ballot harvest and everything else under the sun, and do this to the tune of whatever it is, for local elections, for national elections, and they were to do this each election, they were to get out there and create far more fraudulent votes than they believe the Democrats created, the Democrats would lead the charge for voter ID. The Democrats would lead, and then it would happen. You see, because Democrats are immoral, unethical, anti-white motherfuckers, every one of them. And people who vote Republican are often vote Republican, not necessarily the big wigs at the top who are corrupt and enriching themselves. People who vote Republican are, by far and large, moral, ethical, law-abiding, tax-paying, salt of the earth, serving your country kind of people. And they have, for all of our lives, been appealing to the better side of the Democrat, his moral side, her ethical side, and they don't have one. Not one, not even a modicum. All that matters to a Democrat is winning so that they can destroy Western kind, Western civilization, and these United States. So it's time for all of these Republican voters to take their heads out of their asses and understand that you're not going to be able to talk Democrats out of, and Democrat politicians and Democrat voters out of the creation, if you believe that they are doing this, fraudulent votes. You're not going to be able to talk them out of it. You're not going to be able to go, and it's proven. If there's anything more, this is more proven than the sun rising in the east tomorrow. You're not going to be able to stand up at a lectern and talk about how it's moral for democracy. It's the founding principles of democracy that everybody has a single vote. And it's an assault on our individual freedoms, and it denies us our votes. And then you always hear from Republican voters, they always have to preface it. And it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat voter, then you might lose your vote too. They don't give a shit. Don't you understand? They don't give a shit. When you come out with this moralizing, they're laughing at you. They don't give a shit. When our politicians, when Republicans stand up there and they deceptively dog whistle to us that they're going to care about us, and they get up there and they start talking about what's the moral thing to do, and doesn't make any sense. Golly jeepers, that these Democrats, they want your ID if you're going to attend one of their rallies, but they don't want a voter ID, or they don't want your ID when it comes time to vote. Well, jeepers creepers, aren't they two-faced? Jeepers creepers, aren't they less than completely moral? They're mostly moral, but they're just maybe less than completely moral. That is such a retarded, pathetic, gelded loser joke of a human being in argument. The only thing, listen closely, the only thing Democrats, politicians, and voters know is pain. That's all they understand. And here, I'm not talking about physically assaulting them. No, this would be the pain of filing a lawsuit every election, having a long battle in the courts every single election. This is the pain of learning, what do you mean the Republican got more votes than there are voters in our state? I got, 35% of the total voters in this state. What do you mean they got 140% of the voters in this state? So that they can be stricken with the insanity that they inflict on us, and they have over the totality of our lives. Inflict that suffering on them. If it were to happen, I'm just talking about a hypothetical. I'm not saying do this, because it's totally illegal to do, I'm sure. So you shouldn't do this. And I certainly don't have the wherewithal to be able to do it. I'm just saying, if folks went out there and did this, hypothetically, Democrats would learn of the massive victory of the Republican that they were up against. They would witness the Republican at the giant party that they would be throwing after they won the election with more votes than there are voters. And they would just be there, yeah, look at how great we are. Democrats would be sitting there from home saying, this is a giant crock of shit. Then they would have to be on the phones. Can you believe this? This supporter, that supporter hollering at them. On the phone with this attorney, that attorney. I want the DNC to come help me in my state. And the DNC's phones are ringing off the hook. All of them wanting, you have to come to our state. You have to come over to us. You have to come spend money here. You have to supply us with your attorneys. You have to file in every court across this country so that we can challenge these election outcomes. And then the big gray period of how's it going to shake out? Is it actually going to be proven that there was fraud? Or are they not going to be able to prove that it was fraud, and the Republican who got 140% of the vote is going to get to keep the office? Democrats overnight will change the voting laws. It will suddenly get done. Everything they do gets done. Like we joked before, we quipped before. If the people coming over the southern border, 70% were voting Republican rather than Democrat, the Democrats would have built a wall so high you'd see it from the moon. You'd be able to touch it from the moon. Same thing with voter ID laws. Same exact thing. Now, are there any billionaires who, on the side of liberty and justice and patriotism and love of America? Are there any of them that are going to step up as billionaires on the anti-white side, the Democrat side, and make this somehow happen? I don't know. Boy, I hope they don't, because it's illegal, and I wouldn't want to see that happen. But if it happened, that would be an end to voter fraud and stolen elections. You bet your bottom dollar on it.